this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Melonie. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. The first time I ever went to Las Vegas was for, believe it or not, seems counterintuitive, was for an academic meeting. I'd never seen the place. I never had. I'd heard that it's something you never forget. And I think probably adding to that, I arrived at night. And for those of you, my friends, that have never been to Vegas, and you fly over coming from the East Coast, I always fly to Atlanta. You fly over, once you get past Texas, everything just goes dark out there. There's nothing. As far as the eye can see. And all of a sudden, and this was my experience, all of a sudden, off in the distance, there was a glow. I kept looking out the window. People had told me about this. There was this glow. And as you're on final approach, everything is illuminated. It looks like this gigantic rainbow of neon that illuminates everything. But still all around it is black. Over the past few years, we've heard quite a bit about Vegas in one particular way, and that is bodies that have been found in Lake Mead. The water level had dropped, and there were bodies being found in old oil drums. Today, though, I want to talk about a body that was found just outside of Vegas, not recently, though, and near Lake Mead, but not in it. I want to talk about the death and now the conclusion of a 30-year-old mystery involving the death of a 33-year-old lady by the name of Melonie White. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. You know, Dave, I one of the best experiences I ever had in Vegas was with my wife. I think it was the first time we went out there, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure it was. And I put money in one of those machines, and actually it was a Ghostbuster machine. It was a Ghostbuster machine. And Kim's very conservative when it comes to betting anything. However, I hit the button on this thing and maxed out my bet. And when I did, I won $950. And I did exercise a good practice that everybody tells you. When you hit big, collect your money and walk away. And I did. And we went out and we ate lobster that night. It was a grand experience. I don't think I could do it every single day. I've got friends that actually are from Vegas. And I have friends of mine that have moved there. I know people that used to work for the coroner's office there in Clark County. But I don't know if it would be my thing. I have to take Vegas in like small doses, because it's information overload. I'm overstimulated when I'm out there. You're walking around at night, and we just had CromCon there just a couple of years ago, and it was fantastic fun. But I don't think I could be there all the time. But our story today, it takes us back to Vegas, back many years, 1994, I believe.
It is. And Melonie White is a 27-year-old mother She has a toddler at the time. He's 2.5 years old. And she and her boyfriend at the time decided it was time to start a life together in Las Vegas. They were from Phoenix, Arizona, and made the move. And they moved there in April of 94. And it just didn't go as well as they had hoped. And so there was kind of a bouncing back and forth. After they'd been there for a couple of months having trouble getting a job, they're trying to kind of figure out what to do. And all of a sudden, and they did break up. Okay, Melonie and her boyfriend at the time, they broke up. They're no longer together. So now she's in Vegas. She's got a toddler by herself. This was not the plan. And then, lo and behold, in August of 1994, she comes up missing. And a couple of hikers out by Lake Mead discover her body. They call the police. By the next day, the police have announced that they've identified a 27-year-old Melonie White is dead, and they've ruled the homicide. I mean, obviously, you're not going to end up in the desert a couple of miles, 10, 20 miles outside of Vegas on your own without being killed. And that's what happened. So they ruled her death a homicide. And then it even went a step further, Joseph Scott Morgan. Melonie White, 27-year-old mother of a toddler, had been strangled with a ligature, bludgeoned, and dragged by a car in the desert to the desert wash area that she was found.
Yeah.
That is pretty specific and about as evil as I can think of anything sounding.
Yeah. And, when you see her, and she's a beautiful young lady, very light skin, blonde, very, very blonde hair.
Yes.
She doesn't look like somebody that had lived in the desert, and was kind of a rugged looking individual that you might think of. But
she looked very soft. You're right. I'm glad you just said that. She was soft looking. Oh my word. I did not think of the right word, but she looked soft, dainty, protected. She looked like that. You're right.
Yeah, she did. But, keep in mind, her family's from Arizona, which is not, too far removed from the environment of southern Nevada. Still had family in Arizona. As a matter of fact, I had a flashback just a little bit ago. I was thinking, you remember what it was like to walk into your home or your apartment and you look over at the answer machine, the light is blinking.
Yeah.
How horrible is this? Her one of her brothers was attending Arizona State, which is in Tempe, right there in the Phoenix area. And can you imagine being an undergraduate at a university like that, and you walk in and the light is blinking on your answering machine? You might think that it's, hey, my friends want me to join them for dinner tonight, or maybe there's going to be a study group. That's not what it was. It was his other brother that was contacting him to let him know that Melonie was deceased. And so she's got family. She's got family. She's got siblings. It's not like she's one of these discarded souls, that,
Right.
Is kind of cast adrift in that space that's Vegas. There's an old adage, and I learned this in New Orleans from cops down there. They said, it seems like everybody that's trying to change their life or take on a new persona or do something, they wind up in one of two places, either the French Quarter or the Strip in Las Vegas. And that's true. I mean, I worked cases from people that had just shown up in New Orleans, and it was always a headache because many people would try to assume a new identity. This is back when IDs were readily available that you could, have forged and that sort of thing. On more than one occasion, it turned out that the ID did not match with who I had. And I've talked to investigators in Las Vegas, and it's a very transient environment. Many of us, you and I live in a rural area in Alabama. We don't have a lot of transient movement around here. People that are here have been here for a while.
Right.
it's not like being in an environment where it's kind of tourist related. You've got this cycle that people run through, and can you imagine being a young mama like this, having a toddler, and not have means out there? And so I think you're going to come in contact and come across individuals that certainly do not have your best interest at heart. And in this case with Melonie, I think that was certainly the case.
I'm glad you mentioned the phone call telling the brother, because, whenever, and I'm sure you've been involved in notification of families about a deceased relative. And in this case, a brother calling another brother, I guess it softens the blow. But when you have a sister, in this case, a 27-year-old with a toddler, there's going to be some protective territory there between brothers and sisters when it comes to that. And they probably knew that when she left to go to Las Vegas to get a fresh start on life, that with her boyfriend, they probably knew that relationship ended and that she really was kind of dangling for a moment, trying to figure out, how am I going to do this? Yeah. And I imagine that both brothers were probably concerned at this time. And you mentioned she's not a transient. She's somebody who actually ended up there for a reason. There wasn't like I just was hitchhiking and ended up there. Right. And, I have lived in a number of areas that were beach areas, coastal areas that had, party scene, the party scene going on at the beach. And you have a lot of people move to those areas to be a part of that, to get a job in one of these types of places that caters to vacationers like Vegas does. And when you move to an area like that to get a job, you really have to get into the swing of living there. It's not easy. It's one place to go to vacation. It's another place entirely to go to live.
Completely different. Yeah. I've been toying with the idea of trying to move to Gulf Shores and just rent umbrellas. I'm hoping that'll work out for me someday. I don't think that it will, but every now and then, that thought crosses your mind, doesn't it? You sit there and you think, wow, wouldn't a change of scenery be nice? And look, if she's from the Phoenix area, I've been to Arizona. I was in Arizona in the Army at Fort Huachuca. Lovely state, very, very hot. But it's something that she would have been familiar with. The landscape is not too much different, but the people are certainly different. You're in Vegas, and those people are not going to be the same as the folks that are, say, in Phoenix, Arizona, that might be well established. The geography might look kind of the same, but it's completely different. It's like, it's like a play, isn't it? You can have a stage. The stage might look the same, but all of the actors are different. Maybe the context of the performance is different, but for Melonie, I have to say, Dave, you had kind of listed her injuries that she had sustained. And I have to, it begs the question, I think, who, out of all the people who might occupy that space up and down the Strip and certainly along Fremont Street, where she was last known to be alive, who would want to bring this kind of harm on this beautiful young woman?
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
I'm fascinated by landscapes. I truly am. Geography has always fascinated me. It's really cool because how, and maybe Dave, you can speak to this, but when you have kids, you kind of you live through them vicariously many times. And my son is in college now. As a matter of fact, he's about to finish up, and he's a geography major, but actually he's a GIS major, which means that he studies satellite imagery and remote sensing and all that sort of stuff. He speaks a language I can't understand, but we do talk about topography many times with maps because it's something that I had to use as a death investigator. It's certainly something I'd studied in the Army. And there's an interesting feature that you had mentioned just a moment ago. When Melonie's remains were found, she was found in what is referred to as a wash. And that's interesting because the way I have always understood a wash is that it is almost like a sunken area where you can tell that water at some point in time has moved through that area, but it's not sustainable. It's like a wash is created, I think, when you go from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. Lake Mead, obviously, is at a very low elevation, and you've got mountains that surround that area. So in the monsoon season, or maybe with snow melt, you're going to have these kind of temporary creek beds and things that are created by, this volume of water that's coming down. But when you think about a wash and how it's described geographically or topographically, it's a hidden area. Like you might stand 10 feet back from the edge of a wash and not be able to see down into it. You'll look across a flat plain. You won't appreciate something. Her body was found in a wash, Dave. Can you get a car down into a wash? I guess you could, but it goes to the idea that you and I talk about a lot. People thinking things out almost premeditatively. What am I going to do with the remains now that I've done this now that I've taken a life?
I've tried to figure this out from that standpoint because we certainly have covered a lot of death, it's called body bags, but oftentimes when you have a situation where you have a female victim, 27 years old, my first thing is I'm thinking a man did it, that a man, kidnapped, accosted her and raped her and killed her. That's kind of what my thought process goes to right away.
Right.
Mainly because she was not involved in a relationship at the time. She and her boyfriend had broken up. They'd only been there a couple of months when this happened. And so putting two and two together, you're kind of going, this had to have been a fairly arbitrary situation for her to find herself in. But what got my attention more than just the fact that she had been murdered was that the police said she had been drugged, that she had been tied to a car and drugged to the area where they found her. Now, a wash in other places might be called an arroyo if you're in New Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And wow. It looks like it's been carved out by a river, or that it's the big. You always look at these and think this is like the beginning of the Grand Canyon. Yeah. But there's no water running there right now because there's only water running here when there's a heavy rain, or as you mentioned, flow from the snow runoff or what have you. But you're right that it just kind of pops up out of nowhere. And as you're looking out over the brush and things like that, you do not see them unless they're really big. You can find some small ones, and we don't really know exactly where she was found at this point. We really don't know how long she had been out there. No, you're right. We really don't. And I think that's this wash in particular is actually identified, Dave. It's called the Gypsum Wash, and gypsum that's for you guys that don't know, that's what sheetrock is made out of. And I'm wondering, and it's a mined component. I wonder if there was like a gypsum mine near there in this isolated area where maybe they had been, maybe 100 years ago, they were mining the stuff out of there, and it's adjacent to this mining area. I have no idea, but the place is actually called the Gypsum Wash. And I wonder if that's associated with it. And again, it's within the Lake Mead recreational area. So if you're a cop and you're working a case like this, where you find this lady's body, this young woman, and she is down in this depressed area, it really gives you pause to think,
how familiar would somebody be with this area? Well, you're within the confines of a recreational area. So maybe individuals have camped out there. Maybe they've hunted out there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're rock hounds, because there's a lot of geological or people with interest in geology that go out and they look for all kinds of specimens out in the desert and that sort of thing, because many times the stuff is right sitting on top of the ground, or you just kind of dig superficially and find it. Who would have access to this area? And remember, back then, and this is 94, you don't have CCTV everywhere. If there's a primary gate you have to go through, I doubt very seriously that they're going to have any kind of videography that's going to tie back to this. So as a matter of fact, the people that found Melonie's body were hikers, Dave.
Tells you something right away, that it wasn't just at the end of a driveway.
No.
Because it wasn't just anybody that just came across a body. They were hiking. They were, like you mentioned, I've gone hiking out in areas like that, and it's really, it doesn't sound like there's much. There's a lot. There's a lot of fun to be had in an area like that. And yet here we have a 27-year-old mother just left there like a carcass. And as you begin an investigation like this, Joe, I know that you start with the body and you're going to spread out. You've been explaining this to me over the last couple of shows, and I've really latched onto it. Where do you create the crime scene? Because you know this is where her body ended up, but you know that's not where it began. You know she wasn't killed in that spot.
Oh my gosh, you had to ask me this question.
You've done this to me, man.
Well, no, the reason I'm saying that, man, is that the fact is that this area is so vast. And that's why I keep, kind of emphasizing, even in the opening, talking about Vegas and how it just kind of pops up out of nowhere. Vegas is not supposed to exist. It's like a way station for troops that were coming back from World War II. You hear these stories about how it just kind of popped up. It had been there, but not to the degree it is right now. You're truly, this is like an oasis in the wilderness. There's nothing around you for hundreds and hundreds of miles. So when you find a body that's out in a desolate area, how do you set up the parameters for the area that you're going to look for? Well, you know what my first thought is here, Dave? They're talking about, and keep in mind, they did this assessment all the way back in 94. That's when she was found. When these hikers would have found her body, laying there, again, in this depressed area that they're walking through, when cops finally make it out there, you know what they're going to look for on the surface? Tire tracks. They're going to look for tire tracks, and you can assess the wheelbase on a car based upon its tire track. You can assess wear patterns. You can assess the type of tire that the vehicle was fitted with. Do you have match set of tires? Are these original, what we call OE, which is original equipment? Kind of an interesting term. Like if you go to buy a Ford or a Chevy, there are OE tires on both of those vehicles that are distinct to that brand. And I have no idea who anybody is necessarily affiliated with, but I'll just throw this out there. Let's just say that Ford has an agreement that, all of the tires on their pickup truck, F-150, are going to be equipped with, Firestone tires, and they're going to have a certain size on them. Well, you're going to be looking at the wheelbase, the measurements, that's the width, the length of the vehicle. You'll see if the tires are worn or not. Was the tire heavy, or was the vehicle heavy going in? Was it light? And in this case, you've got this really kind of interesting little added thing here. They're saying she was drugged by a vehicle. Well, if you've got tire tracks, guess what else you're going to have? You're going to have drag marks that depended upon where Melonie's body was positioned relative to the rear of that car or the truck or whichever it was she positioned so that she was in the midline of the vehicle, maybe tied to a trailer hitch or something, and she's being dragged along, and that's going to leave a distinctive mark behind the vehicle. It doesn't rain a lot out there, so the chances that this would be washed away are going to be slimmer than in most locations. So there would still be evidence. And I go back to the idea of trying to set up a perimeter. Where do you begin and where do you end, particularly if you're looking at a location that is so bloody isolated and from everything else, as far as you can see in every single direction. And one other bit to this that's quite ghastly, and I've actually seen this played out. It plays out on roadways in particular, like asphalt surfaces. You can see you can see evidence that people have been drugged by virtue of the fact that there will be tissue deposition on the surface. So as a body is being dragged along, for instance, and you're hitting all the little rocks, the little nuances in the soil, this is baked soil out there, so it's almost like concrete. If you're very careful when you're examining the area, you'll see bits of hair, skin. You'll see deposition of blood. I found teeth before in roadways. I've had friends that have found fingernails. And that was actually in a case where an individual was tied by the ankles and drugged behind a vehicle, and the subject, the decedent, who became the decedent, stuck their fingers into the ground and trying to just protect themselves. Not that you really could, but it ripped their fingernails off. So, contained, that would be your crime scene. You'd be looking for this. And they made this diagnosis. The pathologist looked at her body and assessed all of this trauma, and they concluded that she had, in fact, been drugged. I would think that at the time there would have to be more evidence than just merely on the body, Dave. You would have to have some kind of evidence out at the scene that she had been drugged.
I was looking back over the reports that initially came out in 1994, reading some old articles and old news coverage, because I was kind of finding a dead end. Because to be honest with you, when you're reporting on a cold case from 1994, you're reporting because we have a solution usually, which is why we're doing the story today. And in all of the coverage, what was found out is that we know that she moved with her boyfriend in April with her toddler son. We know that her family, her brothers, they hadn't talked to her in June or July. They were actively trying to locate her because that's about the time that she broke up with her boyfriend in Las Vegas, and they can't locate her. They're concerned. So they reported her missing. Her brothers reported her missing in Las Vegas. And when police have the body turn up, all of a sudden it opened up. Wait a minute, we got a missing persons report on this yesterday. The report came in on the 26th. And they started and they found out, okay, let's retrace. They retraced her to Las Vegas on that night of August 26th, the night before her body was found. They know that she was alive. So she wasn't killed in June and her body was found, in August.
Yeah.
They had her and had eyewitnesses on the night of August 26th. Her body was recovered the next day. So
yeah. And if I remember correctly, please tell me if I'm wrong here. She was last seen in the proximity of Fremont Street.
15th and Fremont, right there.
Okay.
I don't know what that is. What is that area, Joe?
Yeah. So just so folks understand this, like any old city, and I always go back to my hometown in New Orleans, all right, because I think it's one of the greatest places on earth. But
sure.
Aside from that, the closer you get to the heart of the place, generally it's the oldest location, right? It's where the city kind of springs up. Just like with New Orleans, French Quarter is the Vieux Carré, as they say, that's bullseye. That's where the city started. Well, with Vegas, one of the things you have to consider, one of the oldest streets there is actually Fremont. You think about all the old-fashioned neon that you see flashing and whatnot. Matter of fact, there's a great Bond movie. Well, I say great. It's kind of campy, but Diamonds Are Forever. There's a big chase scene with Sean Connery where he's in a Mach 1 Mustang, and they're running up and down Fremont. And that movie, I think, is from like 73. And it's a lot of what people associate with old Vegas. It's different than the Strip, though. The Strip is like where you've got the Bellagio, and you've got Caesars, and you've got all of these places that are big and garish, and those sorts of things. Fremont is the older part of the city. And here's the other thing about it, Dave, is that with Fremont has had a reputation as kind of being a seedy area. Certainly in the past, I think they've done a lot to try to improve it at this point. But, back in 94, this would have been a rough area. It certainly would have been particularly dangerous for a young mother.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn sensational.
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Melonie.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
We've got this young mother who is found out in this isolated area. To have this level of trauma that we're talking about, Dave, you would have to assume that this is a very, very personal case. We talk about this a lot, don't we, brother? Where generally the more over the top the trauma is with a case, it becomes progressively, with each strike of a knife or strike of a hammer or any kind of other trauma that is inflicted, it becomes progressively, at least in my eyes, as more and more personal. And with her, we certainly, in Melonie's case, have no lack of trauma now, do we?
No, and the shocking part about this, Joe, is it's the dragging. Okay, we've got a woman who was strangled and beaten. That's not an uncommon thing to see. I'm not trying to be cold about this at all. I'm not. But the fact that she was dragged, this is a slight woman. This is not a woman who is going to be a physical threat to most men. And the idea of dragging her, I'm praying that she was dead before that took place. The idea that maybe they drug her there and she wasn't, they could have been one, I don't know. But the idea that she has these very specific injuries and they add dragging into the mix, all I can think of is this is somebody who was just out for evil. I can't think of any other reason.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I was toying with this in my mind, scary place, a little bit ago, and I was thinking, what would be the purpose of dragging such a diminutive lady like this? Particularly, she's been bludgeoned and strangled, with ligature. Is it because something horrible was happening and occurred within the vehicle? They knew that they had to transport the body to get rid of her, so therefore they tied her or lashed her to maybe a trailer hitch on the vehicle and drug her out there without putting her bloody body back in the car. Maybe she'd been picked up, taken out there, sexually assaulted, and subsequently killed. And it's like, okay, I don't want to put her back in the car, because even in 94, we understood, and people in the public understood about transfer of evidence. Remember, we're in the age of OJ during this period
this
of time.
Right before then.
Yeah. And so,
wow.
Yeah. So maybe you've got a killer that's thinking like this. So in order to facilitate this, they're going to try to come up with a different solution. How far was she drugged? And again, this is key in trying to understand, because if she's drugged from a specific location, then we have to ask the question, well, was she assaulted in one location with a sexual attack, a strangulation, and a bludgeoning, and then transported to this wash? And we know that there was some type of ligature involved. So that implies that it could be a cord, it could be a rope. So the killer had access to something that he could have secured Melonie's body with. And I think that's kind of an interesting question, as you kind of unpack this case. And from the perspective of an investigator, they would have been armed with this information at that point in time. I think the big issue here is, when did the dragging take place? Was this ante-mortem, or was it a post-mortem event that was facilitating disposal of the remains? I don't know that question will never be answered, but the trauma, it's bad enough, when you have a ligature strangulation, which she would have had marks on her neck, and there would also have been a furrow there, because they wouldn't call it a ligature strangulation if they did not have some type of furrow or external marking that could, it could be a belt, I suppose, but more than likely some type of cord or rope that would create this deep furrow. And regardless of the dragging, you would still be able to see that. You'd still be able to see that mark in the neck. And then the bludgeoning, I guess someone could argue that going down a bumpy road, perhaps being drugged, that's going to inflict blunt force trauma. Obviously, that would be correct. But is it all focalized in her face and her skull? Did she have a depressed skull fracture? Was there an object that was used? Or was it somebody with their bare hands beating down on her, which is easy to facilitate because many times when you have ligature strangulations, again, we talked about this with stabbings, but it applies with bludgeonings and asphyxial deaths. It's very personal. You're very up close. Just imagine if you've ever been in a position where you couldn't catch your breath. You're fighting for air. You're struggling, whether you're beneath the water, or maybe you're choking on a piece of food, or you just can't catch your breath. You're fighting. That survival instinct kicks in. You're going to resist the encroaching of death here at this point in time. So we don't really know the sequencing here, unfortunately, but we do know that she sustained these 3 different types of trauma.
Now, as they were investigating, Joe, I mentioned that they were able to talk to people who were with her the night before, on the night of the August 26th. Her body is found the next day on the 27th, and she is identified the next day after that on the 28th. Very quick in terms of being able to talk to people whose memories are fresh.
Yeah.
Even with all of that, the police could not break this case. And after they talked to witnesses and everybody they knew, they could not find information that led them to her killer. And the case went cold. In 2010, think about it, 16 years after her body is found, it's still an unsolved crime, but they had kept evidence from the crime. From the crime scene, they kept clothing and everything else. And so they, being the investigators, pulled it back out. And they said, we've made all these great leaps in DNA. Let's see if we can find something on this now that we didn't have before. And they did. They were able to develop a DNA profile. And like they always do, when you develop that DNA profile, you send it up to CODIS to see, does it have a hit? Meaning a person is in CODIS after their DNA has been taken and or they're usually committing a crime or have been accused of a crime, and they end up in the national database. And in this case, in 2010, when they had the profile, they did put it up with CODIS and never got a hit. So again, now the case goes cold again until there is a group in Las Vegas that works with police, and they call themselves the Justice League. Is it the Las Vegas Justice League, Joe, or is it? I know that's what they're called.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Super Friends. A tip of the cap to these folks. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That there are people out there that have a heart for this is unbelievable. Is amazing. People spend their time doing all kinds of things in life.
Yes.
When you get a group of people like this, the Vegas Justice League, people talk about, well, I want to support my community and I want to do this and that. Dude, this is like the ultimate.
They're putting feet to their faith.
Yes, they are. And so, yeah, it's actually VegasJusticeLeague.com. And they said, we want to get involved in this. And so it's actual volunteers that are engaged in trying to literally solve cold cases in Las Vegas. The Vegas Justice League actually, just like the police before them, hit a stone wall.
Right.
But they knew that they had DNA. And who do they call on? Well,
Othram.
They call on our friends at Othram.
Yep.
And they were able to get this sample.
They raised the $7,500.
They
actually, yeah, that's again tip of the cap to the Vegas Justice League, Joe.
Exactly. And I don't want to prattle on about this too long, but wouldn't it be so beautiful? It would be a beautiful thing if every state could have an independent of any government organization, that could have an organization like this that would do their own funding and just push it. Look, if there's other places, and I think that if David Middleman was sitting right here, right now, he'd say, I just want to get these solved. The glory doesn't have to go to him necessarily, he just has a heart for this. If it could be pushed toward an organization like this that could just take it, because look, I don't know if people understand how many cases happen in Vegas. Vegas is not the most violent place, but it's steady. People don't understand that. They don't understand why cases go cold. Well, they go cold because of lack of resources, lack of information, and new cases come along. So all of your personnel are, they're put toward that new task that's at hand. Because just because you have one case doesn't mean the world stops. And you can stop the merry-go-round at that point and no other new cases. Those cases are coming in all the time. I have recollections, particularly one night where I had 3 separate cases that were all unidentified in one night that I worked. And I'm just one guy, So how much more so you expand that out over the nation? How many of these cases are there out there? But they were able to find a sample, Dave, in this particular case, and finally provide a family with some answers. And it was apparently retained by the Vegas police to the point where the sample had not degraded. They were able to get it to Othram, and if I'm not mistaken, they identified a perpetrator in this case, Dave.
They took the profile, and it's genetic genealogy. It's the thing beyond DNA. It's one thing to have your profile. It's another to do the genetic genealogy to find out the relatives of this individual that you don't have. They don't have, this person is not in CODIS. This person's DNA is nowhere in the system. So they have to go and find other people that might be real. That's where genetic genealogy comes in. That's where the brilliant minds at Othram are working. And they were able to come up with a name 30 years to the day she was murdered, Joe. August 26, 2024, Othram came up with the name Arthur Lavery. The police followed it up and determined he was the suspect. But Arthur Lavery died in 2021, heart disease, complications of COVID. He was a guy who had been living in Vegas at the time that the murder took place. He had moved away to California. The case was cold. He got away with it and died in 2021. He never popped up. He had one assault charge in his life, and it was prior to DNA being collected from criminals.
Yeah, and you really wonder. I think that you truly wonder if the people that perpetrate these kinds of crimes, if they're not leaving something behind at the scene that could tie them back, because there's 2 separate databases with CODIS. You have the known, and then you have the forensic database, which is the unknowns, being able to track them back through time. And they didn't get a hit on either one of those. And you begin to think about this person. Did he just start that night in 1994 of snatching this young mother off of the streets, Fremont, in Vegas, and decides to take her out into that dark, dark night and brutalize her out there like he did and discard her like rubbish. Well, the truth has finally come out. And God bless those that pursue the truth. God bless Melonie's family. She still has a son that's out there. He's 33 years old now. And maybe this will provide him with some answers. Friends, please hear me right. If you have an interest in helping to solve those questions that seem maybe unanswerable, I urge you, each and every one of you, please just go and explore. Go and explore DNA Solves. That's DNAsolves.com. And you'll see the cases that are open that Othram are currently processing, working on, and they're looking for help. They have no money coming in. This is all independently funded. And they'll take anything you got. If you just got a few bucks you want to send their way, maybe that dollar that you send in will finally give, like Melonie's family, a few answers that they were missing and led to her case being solved after 30 years. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.